Another great class. So had a class today. I scheduled it in advance because I bought some credits and kind of wanted to spread them out throughout the week. So I managed to book an hour with another new tutor, Diego, who has since been added to my favorites list because he's awesome. But yeah, so I had Diego for an hour, and I'll probably start with the not so great part and then go on to the good stuff. So, the not so great part was like I was reviewing my notes, but unfortunately, because my mouse went inactive for some time, then the Zoom app is programmed that if I'm inactive for a certain amount of time, it shows me as like not even there. Um, and I'm sitting there going through my notes, and then my time comes up, and I'm thinking, what the hell? Like, why isn't he calling yet? Like, this is, we're getting into the time now. A minute goes by, 2 minutes go by, and I realize, oh crap, it's because I look like I'm not there. So as soon as I hit my mouse, boom, it showed me as available. And there were two messages from him already saying like, hey, are you ready for a class? So obviously I responded to those messages right away. But then the thing that kind of bothered me was, like, he wasn't just there waiting. Like, you have a class starting with a student at a particular time, you check to see if they're there. They're not quite there yet. You should be give it a few minutes before you completely just say, okay, I'm not going to stand by my screen or whatever. Because then when I messaged him back, it took him another few seconds or so to get back to me. And then even then he was like, I'll call you in a sec. And I'm like, well, why a sec? Why can't you just call me right now? Like, you should be there waiting. Like, if I had answered the call at the time when you first messaged me, we'd be in class right now. So why aren't you just waiting? And then the other thing that kind of bothered me a little bit too, I didn't say anything because I didn't want to seem rude or anything. I'm Canadian, so I'm always trying to be polite. But he ended the class a little bit early. So we had an hour, which is fine, but we already kind of lost 5 minutes with us not being able to connect right away. And then when it came to ending the class, at about 4 or 5 minutes before the class was over, he was like wrapping up and like, okay, well, have a good day, bye. And we ended up finishing the class maybe about 4 minutes early. So that kind of bothered me because yes, we had an hour, but we should be using all of that time, not wrapping up 5 minutes early. Even if it's like we were doing a lesson, but we could have just had a quick conversation, getting to know each other, learning more about each other. It wouldn't have taken more than 5 minutes, and then we could have gone right to the end of time. So that just really kind of bothered me a little bit. But he was a super nice guy. We had an awesome class. Again, I was supremely impressed with myself at how much Spanish I was able to understand with him speaking. There were quite a few questions that he asked me that some of them I hadn't heard before, or I hadn't heard in a long time, and I was right there with the answer. And most of the time I answered in Spanish. There were a couple of times where I had to get him to repeat himself, but I've been noticing that that's just been happening, where it's like I catch a few words and I'm like, okay, if you just said that one more time, I think I'd get the whole thing. And most of the time that's been happening, so that's really cool. But just overall, it was really great. So again, I asked for the conversational class, and again, I'm not sure whether or not that's what we did, because what he did have me do, which is something that was mentioned in the lesson that I had with Vanessa yesterday, was she was saying about me reading some paragraphs and then us talking about them. So I don't know if she put that note in there and that's why he decided to do that, but that's what we ended up doing. Is he had a document on there, obviously in Spanish, and I read it, and then we spent time discussing what the paragraph meant, sort of identifying some of those vocabulary words that I wasn't familiar with or whatever. It was really interesting because this is pretty much what I can do in most cases. I could read Spanish like nobody's business. Even he said, he's like, your pronunciation is really good. Your enunciation is really good. When there's a question, you know how to say that correctly. So he's like, you're really good at that. So you don't really need practice in reading, but vocabulary and being able to discuss things. So that's where the problem lies. I don't mind doing the reading. I do find it to be beneficial because it is helping me train my tongue to those Spanish words. In addition to the fact that he taught me something about Spanish that I didn't really know or understand, which is the difference between when a C with a vowel is a hard C or when it's a soft C. And that makes all the difference when you're reading a word, because there's some words you read and I'm like, okay, when I'm reading this, am I reading that as a hard C or am I reading it as a soft C? I'm like, there's two C's in this word. So which one is the hard C and which one is the soft C? Or are they both hard or are they both soft? So it's like, I always found very confusing because I was reading a sentence and I said it wrong and he was like, no, it's like this. And I'm like, tell me what the rules are on this because I need to know. This is ridiculous. He was able to give me that and it helped so much more. Like as I read the rest of the paragraphs, when those words came up that had a C with a vowel, I was like right there with it because now I know how it's pronounced, C with a CA, with a CE, and going on from there. So that was really cool. That was a super beneficial thing that I learned today. Unless I book something before, I don't have another class for another few days, which is good because I can focus on some other stuff. But in the meantime, I guess I'll probably still be watching the Spanish language television show and reviewing my notes, which I'm thinking I want to really get into the habit of reviewing my notes a little bit before I start my lesson. Not necessarily that I'm trying to cram or anything like that, but just familiarizing myself with my own notes, because I did find there was one time where there was a word that was used with one of my tutors and I was like, I don't know what this word is. I've never seen this word before in my life. And then when I was reading through my notes, that word was actually just sitting there staring at me going, hey, remember me? You haven't used me yet. So it's important that I sort of read my own notes so that I can be familiar with what I'm trying to remember, so that I can actually remember them. But another great class, despite the sort of time issues which bothered me. I really feel good about it. He was telling me, he's like, you have to continue doing this. I'm like, I am, dude. I'm so sticking with baseline until I feel I get to that point where I'm fluent. Like once I can log on to the portal and just have a conversation with a tutor, not think about it, and it's completely in Spanish and we're just like almost like two friends just talking about whatever, that at that point, maybe then I'll leave baseline. But even then, it's probably unlikely. I just want to be able to keep that Spanish, because like any language, you can learn it, but if you don't use it, then you'll start losing it. It's the same thing for me when I was learning Mandarin in China. When I was learning Mandarin in China, I was learning it. It was becoming more and more comfortable, more and more fluent. Since I've left China now and I don't use the language, I don't have the opportunity to use it, I've actually lost quite a bit of it. So there are words and phrases that I know that I knew, and now I can't even remember them. And I don't want to ever lose my Spanish. So I'll probably be staying with baseline for quite some time, even after I get to that point of fluency. So looking forward to another great class.